This is a good question. I got asked about two Chargers quarterbacks. Who was better out of Dan Fouts and Phillip Rivers? Who had more talent around them? And who did I prefer? That's a good question because, you know, the Chargers, as I've often said when I do football videos, they're the most talented team with the shortest amount of delivery. One Super Bowl appearance considering the kind of talent. And when I mention names and people they've had, the results don't match. It's kind of like talk about underachieving, talking about not getting it right, talking about leaving a lot to be desired. They haven't gotten it right. It's just like one of those situations where it's kind of like they just never quite got it right. Um, you know, um, it's one of those situations where you just kind of scratch your head. You kind of like, how do you miss so much? But this is a good question because growing up, the Chargers had Charlie Joyner, Wes Chandler, John Jefferson, Chuck Muncie, James Brooks. They had some people that I like, but apparently Phillip Rivers, who had LaDainian Thompson, uh, had Antonio Gates, had apparently the way it comes off in Junior Seau. That was a big difference to what they didn't have in the 80s with Dan Fouts. Because remember, they couldn't play in the cold. They couldn't win. They had Kellen Winslow Sr., who was one of my all-time favorite tight ends. Air Coryell with Dan Coryell, Marty Schottenheimer. So it all depends on how you weigh the pros and the cons. But apparently it says that Phillip Rivers had obviously passed for more yards and had the career. But who moved me more? Who was the eyeball test for me of the two? Because it's a very compelling question. Um, from my eyes and my visual point, um, I got to go with Dan Fouts. But if I go by, if we go by the criteria based on the statistics and who had, what ended up happening, Rivers had the better statistical hit. But if I'm going by the eyeball test, Fouts moved me more. Pardon me. Fouts moved me more. It's always tricky when you have these kind of questions because you got to go based on what you remember and you got to go based on what you saw. And then you got to kind of take it in and think, because sometimes you get these kind of situations where you're like, that guy didn't really hit like that. That guy really wasn't that, it's kind of like, how do you remember it? How do you put it in perspective? And it was, when I think about the Chargers, um, it's like, yeah, one guy had more numbers, but one guy seemed to always have a chance. Things just didn't fall their way. So who